Okay, now that we've dealt with the others,
하루가 저물어가는 동안
let's move on to
나는
Heathcliff.
그저 서 있을 뿐이었어.
Let's see what identities he has and analyze those. First we have She South Section 5. Now, during an assassination contract, Ishmael, who was with Heathcliff, was irritated when her opponents didn't listen to her, shouting that thrusting doesn't work when it's done in the enemy's face. Yeah, that, out of context, sounds horrible, doesn't it? Apparently, she was saying this as she dodged a long blade swung by her opponent. Possibly a Kurokumo clan. Although it was revealed that the two that was fighting was not enemies. There was some murderous violence, yes, but apparently this wasn't training. These were words of advice, and this happened every day between them, so none of the others intervened. One of his opponents managed to graze him, which hurt him noticeably. He demanded that they keep still. Ishmael complains that he's an assassin, so he should kill by assassination, not knowing how he was able to join them. This annoyed Heathcliff as he saw it as assassination. If there are no witnesses, what more does she want? This shocked her by the unexpected bitterness in his voice. She didn't expect him to say that out loud, baffled by that childish rebuttal. Yeah, she was done and wanted to have a word with the director. He wanted to go after her, but he knew it would be pointless. He looked up to the sky, then uttered his feelings while expelling a sigh. He knows that he needs to earn a living, even knowing that he's not fit for that kind of work. He clearly has his own internal issues. This variant of Heathcliff likely diverged from the main version regarding who he ended up recruited by after he fled Wuthering Heights, regardless of whether this was before or after the multiversal timeline alteration, where either he was recruited by the She Association after he left the Dead Rabbits, or he was recruited before he had the attention of the Dead Rabbits. Well, he wasn't a conventional assassin, considering that his idea of assassination was that it's murder with political intent. Stealth and subtlety are optional. Or, to put it another way, you can't be detected if there's no one around to detect you. Although one thing hasn't changed in this universe, he was still irritating Ishmael. As for Section 5 director Don Quixote, she clearly had her hands full managing Section 5 and not just stopping Heathcliff and Ishmael from killing each other, before those guarding their targets might at least attempt to. Next we have our core Rabbit Team 4th Pack. One of the many Heathcliff clones was having the time of his life, laughing vivaciously yet sanguinary at the carnage that he and his brothers were causing to the enemy. He decided to keep on blasting, unleashing fiery fury from his rifle. The wide grin on his face said that he felt better than... Well, he never felt better when he was beating his opponents to a pulp. Winning a barroom brawl, blasting through his targets with a wide grin on his face, splatters of blood splashing onto his cheeks and armor. He didn't let go of the trigger, It simply wasn't an option to him. Until he ran out of ammo. He then threw the gun at his opponent, as if it was dead weight to him at that point, and this ignited the opponent's clothes as it hit them, as the gun was red hot due to almost overheating. Heathcliff then reasoned that if he can't use his paws to plough through the grass, he'll just have to bare his teeth. He then took out his stabby knife and lunged towards the enemy, going, "Oh," and tore his foes to tatters. He loved his suit as he felt stronger with each scrag. He felt intoxicated, based on his gleaming eyes, considering that he's having fun doing his job. That doesn't seem to be anything to worry about. It's unclear how he was able to pass the test at an examination village, but in this reality, he somehow was successful, and he was recruited into our corps as the template for its clone mercenary army, specifically the Rabbit team. Yes, I know, an army of Heathcliffs. One Heathcliff is dangerous enough, never mind a whole squad of them armed with knives and firearms. There's also something of note to consider, that his suit seems to have some form of stimulus to it, either technological or chemical or somewhere in between, that motivates him to keep killing and have fun doing it. Almost like building up a combo in a fighting game. S-class guns are available to our corps. That likely requires some serious strings being pulled to get a license to have them made, and some creative working to make them legal. Never mind the cost of the guns and the ammo for all of the packs of the Rabbit teams. In the Botany Corporation, 20 of them could appear at most, although in other operations more are likely to appear. In the Botany Corporation, they were chosen as backup because they were the safest of the 3 teams, as they'd attack and kill any in the area, but otherwise not kill any outside of said areas. The rhinos would have too much collateral damage in terms of damaging the facility, and the reindeer would risk frying the brains of Ayin and the others. And this is even worse considering that the department heads were brains in robotic bodies that would make R2-D2 snicker in derision. Their brains are the only things that they haven't lost. Although I suspect that they periodically replace the teams of each pack, rather. Yes, they periodically replace the teams of each pack, whether it be because they eventually stop making viable clones, if they make copies of copies, or if they overreach themselves. Either way, they might attract the Ravens, which is hinted to be their internal affairs division. This might mean that the existence of Heathcliff in any form is on borrowed time, even by the city standards. And this is one of those where Carmen speaks of Heathcliff. Yes, she does this much. Clearly, she gets some amusement out of this. Especially if it's similar to her previous victims. Now for Encore Kleinhammer. Heathcliff was fighting for the Nagel und Hammer, or the Hammer and Nail, an organization to whom Encore is the ultimate authority. He saw it as not what he hoped for. He didn't know what he was getting himself into. He wants to do better. What Kathy said that day jabbed his heart painfully, so he ran out, swearing that he'd never go back. An Inquisitor saw that as enough, telling him to head back. Heathcliff asked himself how he got himself caught up in this. That Inquisitor then called out to him. This shook Heathcliff out of his distracted mindset, who asked if he didn't hear what they just said. They're heading back, telling him to follow him. Heathcliff was asking what the deal was with the odd-looking nail, like there's a transparent needle at the center, which started filling with something when it was jabbed into a person, where it's like human. But before he could continue that Inquisitor asked him what he was occupied with. Heathcliff dismissed it as nothing. That Inquisitor saw that day as a day of ritual, telling Heathcliff that he should get rid himself of any distracting thoughts in advance. Heathcliff didn't think highly of their bloody ritual, making him memorize phrases from a headache-inducing book. Then they decided that it was time to feed him some white porridge out of a can. And once he did, his memory started to slowly blur and melt together. That Inquisitor told him the chant, "Heretics," and Heathcliff completed that by saying, "shall be purged." And this surprised him. Much like with R-Corp Rabbit Team 4th Pack Heathcliff, he likely went to an examination village and took an exam, but instead of being recruited into R-Corp as a template for a team of a pack of its clone army, he was recruited by N-Corp as part of its Psycho division, the Nagel und Hammer, a fanatical crusading army hunting down heretics, or those with prosthetics, which are cybernetic replacement parts. In the main universe, they've demonstrated that they're willing to kill all of those within core, whether they have full body replacement prosthetics or just work on the manufacture of them. They're also willing to kill any human that's still fully organic that is associated with a prosthetic user, such as Dante and the Damned Dozen. As for their standard method of execution, when they can, it involves a form of crucifixion, where they're left to die slowly and painfully. They even do that to those that might investigate them, although they were likely ordered to do this to Limbus Company on site, as they were the enemy to N-Corp at that point. Which is why they crucified Effie, even crudely putting on a crude prosthetic on him. Not even the dead are safe from their insanity, as they're even willing to dig up the graves of their victims and crucify the prosthetic bodies that likely have no living organic parts left to move them, like they did with Sinclair's family, although in that case it was because Chroma wanted to torment him farther than she already did. Anyway, going off topic, let's get back to it. As it was demonstrated with Yi Sang in the main story, N-Corp are not above using drugs to keep those that work for them subservient, or at least to prevent them from even entertaining the idea of escaping captivity. Likely used with those that were basically conscripted, those that was forced into N-Corp, or those that aren't yet fully compatible with the company mindset. In this case, they appear to make the less initiated or indoctrinated eat these canned rations, or canned experience that look like white porridge. While the nutritional content appears intact, it sounds as it's, engaging as a lecture on the finer points of English folk dance routines. Even considering the fact that in combat with a suit of armour, that does burn a lot of calories. One thing that it don't tell the lower ranks is that it debilitates the will, gives them the experience of being a true believer. Yes, canned experiences being N-Corp's singularity. It makes them more vulnerable to indoctrination. Do this enough times, and for the purges of heretics, it becomes second nature. Oh yes, and the armour is the Nagel und Hammer is N-Corp's knighted the order, much like the M Corps, Order of the Lunar Visage. Yes, they're quite numerous in the west of the city. And this is also another world where the memory of Catherine was erased, but not the presence of her. As after Chapter 6, her name in the cutscene was censored, but if she truly was erased from the history of that universe, she wouldn't be mentioned at all. There'd be no hint of her. Now let's talk about the Boss Me e.g.o. Sunshower Heathcliff. Now, Heathcliff, a member of the Technology Liberation Alliance, has spoken that his colleagues have died. 3, 5, maybe 6. The number doesn't matter anymore. They were killed by those wretched technologies that won't stop springing up. One lost their job and starved. One got their flesh torn apart. Others worked like cogs in the machine, treated like subhuman junk. Damn. He saw them as all diligent chums, thankful that they were good to a bloke like him. He regretted not showing that gratitude. He was the one lucky bugger. He was the only one that didn't get swept up by the rushing waves of technology and die. He ran off and roamed the back streets like a thrown-away umbrella until they took him in. But he didn't believe that he deserved them. They all went away, like wet paper being torn away. The regret and shame that he felt as he watched it all happen had his anger boiling, questioning if that technology didn't exist as they said. He could have been laughing and fooling around at a backstreets pub with his friends that could have been alive. So he decided to get serious as he could be and ravage all that he could this time. They worked on science and technology to make life comfortable, but those things ended up taking lives. It's why he started thinking that things like those shouldn't have existed in the first place. They dug into the rotten remains of a fallen wing that once stood at the top of the technological prowess and put on what was called e.g.o. Products of technology that they detested, finding it ridiculous to think that technology had a mind. That thing did, however. As soon as he wore it, he felt cold and dark feelings. An endless swirl of gloom that was wrapped around him. As it did, it felt like it was like him. Like he did in the past. It once had a friend, but got driven out and abandoned. This made him think, gave him the motivation to fight, to take down those trying to protect their damn technology, and drown us all so that they'd never see the light of day again. It won't bring back his colleagues, though, but it will reduce the number of people that'll end up like them. But when he's done, the chill reminded him that he was alone, as he sat there like some homeless beggar. He went back to wandering the damp, dark alleys. He can hardly sleep anywhere else. He knew that the e.g.o. will kill him one day, like how technology doomed his friends, seeing it for the cruel joke that it was. He wanted to stop thinking at that point. It wouldn't give him answers. Once he's done with that job, he'll go back with pride. Once the new world is made, he'll have another chance. We found out that he was talking to a cat all this time, telling it to leave now, not to try and give him any attention. He has no friends left now. In this world, regardless if he joined the Dead Rabbits or not, Heathcliff ended up in District 11 and found a course to follow in the Technology Liberation Alliance, where at some point after signing up with them, he attacked e.g.o facilities and even breached the Lobotomy Corporation branch facility, where he was able to find the sun shower e.g.o, which he used. But unlike Dong Big, who used it, he was somehow able to survive the attack on Keiko, but was at best one of the few survivors, and he was unaware of any others, and at worst, the only one. This e.g.o either made Heathcliff gloomy or amplified the gloom that was already there, as it's known to have side effects to the wearer, and for those that were incompatible, it can lead to e.g.o corrosion, where it takes the wearer over. Also, according to Faust, it can be quite taxing if used for too long, even for those who are compatible. If the attack fails, then it's likely that this Heathcliff is on borrowed time, and K-Corp will eventually hunt him down to claim that which is owed. Now for 7 Association South Section 4, Heathcliff. Heathcliff received a splitting headache as if it was about to split in half and fly off. He didn't understand how anyone, such as writers, made a living doing that torture every bloody day. Apparently he did things based on intuition. His sources, gut feeling. He asked himself how he was supposed to explain that. He examined hundreds of scenes since he started working there, and he was working there for a good while too. Before that, he's seen enough of the rough and tumble and had more than his fair share of violence, or in simple terms, he speaks from personal experience. After that, the hows and whys of a murder scene just comes naturally to him. Just intuition, nothing more. He's not an armchair detective in those mystery novels. He can't figure out the whole scene and scheme from a glance. Sometimes clues get lost in the whole mess. Then he grabbed his head, calling himself a profiler, not even understanding what that meant. Where he was writing up reports every day. He's about to lose it. He won't quit. He has a love of catching those that believe themselves to be smart, watching their overcomplicated conspiracies blowing up in their faces because some poor, uneducated sod like him caught them with their britches down. Seeing that as priceless. He also saw it as therapeutic to meet them face to face before caving their skulls in.
Seeing their stupid looks on their faces, like it didn't occur to them once they found out. It was entertainment to him. Though he wished they had some documents while wielding his sword, asking Faust if that's him. She confirmed this. He was the last of the first floor personnel. Heathcliff understood this to roughly translate to "Off with his head!" asking how many need to be gone through. Faust replied that the second and third floor adds up to 30 people. He decided that they should crack on. They've got 2 blank reports to be filled out back at the office. Faust reminded him that the case was added before they departed for that assignment. Heathcliff was slightly annoyed by this reminder of what to deal with. When red tape was concerned, there was only so many heads that he could smash before even that satisfaction began to dull, wanting time to blow off some steam.
This Heathcliff somehow was able to pass the test to join 7 Association, the association that deals in intelligence, where they investigate what they're hired to investigate. While they're not primarily a combat-oriented association, that doesn't mean that they won't fight when they need to. This is considering that Virgilius, the Red Gaze, is implied to at least had some affiliation with the 7 Association in the past. It would appear that this Heathcliff was still recruited into the Dead Rabbit in the past, and he was still one that had a rather blunt force approach. Either that, or that's what he was taught through numerous beatings in Wuthering Heights. Although the most annoying part of his job within Seven Association is red tape. Now, this identity would seem to imply that Heathcliff has some intelligence. He just wastes it a lot of the time. Where in the main universe, even he understood that there's no getting out of dealing with the Kurokumo clan in the backstreets of District 20, without either paying them off or killing them. Right, now that we've gone through that part, let's talk about Pequod Harpooner Heathcliff. Heathcliff held a dagger, sharp as a razor, normally used to cut ropes for harpoons. His hands were trembling, beads of sweat rolling down his forehead as he fixed his eyes upon the tip of the dagger. He bit down on a thick piece of rope in his mouth. Bringing the dagger to his forearm, and cut. A pained weeping, a quiet wailing, something in between. The rope could not contain such sounds from escaping his mouth, but he continued to cut, faster and faster, flesh splitting with every gash hewn by the dagger, lifting his tattooed flesh off his skin little by little. The brand of the middle must be removed. There are places in the city that could remove the tattoos, but the middle's tattoos are harder to remove than the standard strength augmentation tattoos, but a solution to remove them was somewhere. Yes, they could be removed, but that's not how he wanted to remove them. Because of the choices he made, the shame of his past, the brand of his alignment. There was once a woman whom he loved dearly. Her words broke his heart. Wrath and jealousy drove him to wander until he somehow found his way into the middle. But no matter how much time he spent as a part of the middle, there was no going back like that. All of it had to be removed by his own hands. It was the only way that he could be free from them. So that he could stand proud before those that he lived around when he returned. At least that's what he thought, why he mutilated himself. He likely boarded that ship in the hopes that, in the far lakes, they would not be able to pursue him. He killed many things as he toiled as the Pequod's harpooner, killing mermaids to turn their flesh into jerky, killing pirates that got in the way. He even hunted whales. He was the captain's harpoon, always striking where the captain ordered him to strike, yes. Carmen referred to him as child, as she did with the others. Things have changed since then. Back then, he killed by choice. Now, he no longer trusts himself, so he kills under the captain's orders now. Clearly recalling what the captain declared. Once the voyage was over, everything would come to be. The future that he wanted, the path that he wished to go in, an old love he so dearly wanted to meet again, believing that once it was all over, they'd all return. So he continued to tear his own flesh and pierces the whales with his harpoon. Clearly he switched roles with Queequeg, even joining the middle and gaining a lot of tattoos in the process, almost becoming Big Brother. Even including the self-inflicted brain damage and self-harming to cut the tattoos. That was present as well, although even with the role switching, he still thinks of Kathy. Although, this is another world where her memory from others was erased, but not her physical presence. It's also a little amusing and also scary that he's submissive towards Captain Ishmael, a psychotic whaler who is hunting the Crimson Whale. The writhing bringer of hentai, as in the main universe, they didn't get on that well. With both this version of Heathcliff and the main version of Queequeg, it's implied that they signed up to that whaling ship to go to a place where the middle would be unlikely to pursue, due to how dangerous the Great Lake was at the best of times. Next we have Wi-Fi Association South, Section 3. The contract chamber was as cold and silent as a freezer. Oh, so District 25 on a bad day. Two people sitting across one another in that cold room. One appeared extremely terrified, the other appeared angry. Yet all were silent. This was due to Heathcliff, fixer of the Wi-Fi Association, South Section 3, slowly marching towards them. After a brief lapse into unprofessionalism, he told them that commencing attendance and observation of the mutually agreed upon contracts, the proceedings will be observed upon by the Wi-Fi Association South Section 3 fixer Heathcliff. Every word spoken and written exchanged in those proceedings will be observed by him. The attendee and can be used between and even against the two parties. Yes, the attendees, rather. This contract has been put into effect the moment that it was submitted to the Wi-Fi Association. Any disturbance of the execution of that contract or any behaviour that may be considered a breach of contract will... He slammed the door with the tip of his polearm to emphasise the point, as it has been stipulated in the Wi-Fi Association duties as an attendee and an observation, will result in execution of the involved parties as per the terms of that contract. Ooh, light on legalese, isn't it? He told them to reply if they confirm that the clause has been fully understood. Everyone has heard of the Wi-Fi Association, with their gaudy hats and cloaks, their polearms. They're not those that seek combat, they follow contracts. Those that fail to fulfill them will be chased to the ends of the earth to make sure that the contract is executed. The extent of this depends on how much they're paid and what the contract has in it. This just makes them even more reliable. Both parties told them that they understood. Rather told him that they understood. Heathcliff advised not doing anything stupid and wasting each other's time. The first order of things was the contract summary. He was annoyed while doing this, but this was part of the job, which implies that this isn't the kind of work that he might be suitable for, but he was skilled at going over the contract. Then we get to the part where he goes to the end of the summary. The clause asking if it's mutually agreed to and is fully understood by both parties present. Both agreed. Heathcliff covered every corner of the contract to verify that neither part had any issues with its clauses. Then the angry party slammed the table and jumped to his feet, telling the terrified one that he called that it wasn't what they agreed upon. This caught Heathcliff's attention. The angry party told the terrified party that he'd take the burden himself, asking why he's pulling that kind of... Heathcliff scowled at this exchange. The more polite and terrified of the two knew what this meant. It meant that they were... He tried to calm the less polite one down, and Heathcliff gave his only warning to them, as he was told that the contract was mutually agreed upon. He's there only to observe and thereby ensure that it goes into effect. If they were going to pull something that would void the contract at this stage, then the next contract with their name on it would be one for their coffin. The terrified party agreed with him, not wanting to die, advising that the other party listen to him. This was falling on the deaf ears of the angry party. If he calmed himself, he could have prevented what was about to happen. Heathcliff then decided to respond to this blatant ignoring of his warning, as that contract clause stipulated that should one party refuse to comply with the clauses, any following refusal after that warning was, it would result in the execution of the concerned parties. He was a fixer of the Wi-Fi Association. They're legal enforcers of contracts and always ensured that they were carried out, even if it meant resorting to forceful measures. His duty was to see a contract approved and observed by that association to the end. The contract chamber was supposed to remain silent, save for the voice of the observer, was now filled with the sounds of something wet getting chopped to pieces. In this case, it was the two parties that was killed when one of them just couldn't shut up. After Heathcliff was done, he slumped onto a pile of bloodied flesh that was once the client's. Apparently this was the start of the day's schedule, and it started with a massacre. He had 4 more contract readings to go through. He threw the now useless contract away and then read a different one. He decided to move on from that incident and remarked that the next contract had no deadly clauses, hoping that they're better keeping their words, leaving that chamber as if nothing happened. Standard procedure for him. In this universe, Heathcliff, either directly from leaving Wuthering Heights or after that, and then leaving the Dead Rabbits, he was recruited into the Uifi Association. Those fixers of the Uifi Association are basically glorified lawyers. They oversee trade deals and contracts. They are also potentially lethal towards those that breach the terms of the contract, depending on the clauses in said contract. Pluto could have used them to check the contract that allowed Roland to screw him over, as he'd likely refuse to sign it once the terms were made clear. Zhong's office is a known affiliate of theirs. The Kane office is likely another affiliate of theirs as well, as they're a notary office that dealt with patent disputes. They clearly are less than forgiving towards transgressions, only warning them once before carrying out the clause that involves whatever punishment is needed to be delivered. Which is how the former Ring researchers differed from the real Uifi, as they were impersonating them during a will reading at Wuthering Heights in Chapter 6. That, and they wielded their paintbrush spears rather than the standard issue polearms. I mean, can you imagine what Phoenix Wright would be like in that reality? Where he'd say objection to a clause that was disputed, and when the warning was disregarded, he'd say, hold it, before carrying out the clause that meant they had to kill them. He wouldn't be just the judge and the jury. He'd be the executioner as well. The attire and even the weapon of the Uifi Association is patterned on the Swiss guards, those that guarded the Vatican City, protecting the Pope since 1506, although it's less colourful than theirs. This is notable as this is the first Fixer Association identity that's Section 3. So he's clearly quite good at his job. Either that or the time that this was extracted at was a bit farther along than Section 5 and of the She Association and Section 4 of the 7. Let's move on to the multi-crack office fixer Heathcliff. A fixer of the multi-crack office was trying to get Heathcliff's attention during a peaceful afternoon. Carmen was observing that Heathcliff was staring at the ceiling for a while, who slowly turned his head towards his colleague, who asked if he was planning to zone out for the rest of the day, as it's lunch already. Heathcliff thought it was a slow day, considering that it's lunch, seemingly unconcerned. Carmen noted the amused laughter of the others, which indicated that this wasn't the first time this had happened, as he pulled his hair with all 4 of his hands, which it might make him feel a little self-conscious, so he quickly attempted to change the subject, asking why the colleague called him, who replied that they're going out for lunch at Ham Ham Pang Pang around the corner, asking if he's coming with them. He wasn't interested. This was surprising to the colleague as they thought that he loved fish and chips, their new seasonal menu. He went for that every lunchtime for a while. Heathcliff told them that he wasn't hungry. The colleague asked if he had his digestive tract replaced with a prosthetic, considering this to be disgusting, not wanting to do that themselves. That wasn't it. His voice resonated with a burst of frustration doused with a heavy sigh. Apparently he's had a lot on his mind lately. The colleague told him to give them a call if he changed his mind. They don't mind picking one up to go for him. Carmen then observed that they all left, leaving Heathcliff on his own in that office, which was completely silent, save for the sound of ticking clock hands. No typewriters, calculators, or pens scratching against paper. He saw this as a bother, regretting not leaving his eardrums intact. He rubbed his ears, which had been recently replaced with prosthetics. Then he went back to staring at the ceiling. He's been having funny thoughts lately. It turned out that his apathy was due to the fun of battle not being there anymore. Carmen saw that violence was nothing new to him, even in his backstreet days, but it was never that dull for him. Smashing someone's skull used to make him laugh with exhilaration. Facing a powerful enemy used to make his competitive spirit burn brightly. After he cooled down from the heat of battle, he'd go back to his usual self and think what any average person would. He wouldn't go as far as to kill anyone, or if he's gone too far, but those thoughts have grown less recently. This was true for the day that he participated in a contract expedition. A syndicate thug considered him crazy, as he almost lost an arm there. He didn't give a he'll replace it if it broke. His boss has dozens of backup arms at the ready. The syndicate thug believed that he'd lost his mind. Carmen was battling a syndicate of the backstreets, as per the terms of the contract. Some were even using prosthetics as well, but most were of dodgy quality, and it wasn't that many regardless. Carmen saw that most of the thugs reacted with the same horror as they faced Heathcliff. Other fixers would back away from the attacks that they would try on Heathcliff. Sweeping attacks that would help them to make room for them to momentarily regroup. Heathcliff was not impressed. They stabbed his arm, and it didn't hit the circuitry where it mattered. This didn't faze him. He gladly took the beating and then continued to advance closer to his enemies. Destroyed arms and punctured shoulders were a minor setback, as they could be replaced within minutes, as long as he had enough cash. He didn't give a how much damage he took. The battle was easy. This made Heathcliff bored. For him, a grueling battle was Tuesday. He said, "Oh, we won," as if it was the height of tedium. Even stabbing his enemies forcefully with his bidents made him go, well, either bidents or spears. It made him go, "Oh, there goes," as if the action has no meaning to him. The violence was uninspiring to him. Surface-level observations were mind-numbingly boring to him. Then the colleague from earlier saw that he was zoning out, snapping Heathcliff out of his dry reminiscence of the expedition. Carmen noted that Heathcliff was about to thank them for bringing a sandwich. Then he looked down as his co-worker was wildly swinging his arms while pointing at the table. This drenched the report that he spent the morning writing in his spilled coffee. Heathcliff asked if he spilt that. The fixer confirmed that, and Heathcliff didn't know as he didn't feel heat. The colleague reminded him that the report was due today, asking if he was okay with losing the entire morning's work. Heathcliff saw this as more time to waste his afternoon time on. While Heathcliff was seemingly annoyed, the co-worker pushed him away from the desk. cleaning up any surviving documents and also the mess on the desk. Then Heathcliff was returned to his seat. Carmen observed this, and then Heathcliff let out a hollow chuckle and leaned back on his chair. He considered quitting. He'd been spending days sitting in the office while not out to work on the contracts. His original plan was to work there for a little while before quitting, but he's been unable to carry out the last part of that plan. He didn't see where else he could work. He was in a comfortable space. Hot coffee could be spilled without a problem. Discussing replacing body parts wouldn't be out of place either. It would appear that a sense of camaraderie that made him feel awkward whenever he left the premises of the building. Yes, he could certainly grab piping hot items without hesitation. He could walk for hours without ever getting tired. This gave him a feeling of alienation, ever since he replaced most of his body with prosthetic parts. He doesn't want to go anywhere without his family, his fixer office, wondering if any interesting contracts would be picked up. A small pebble that would make the tiniest ripple in his tedious, uneventful life. He then went back to look at the ceiling, days rolling, clicking by like cogs in a machine. He'd grown used to this life. Life in the city. The divergence point would appear to be sometime after he left the Dev Rabbits, considering that he mentioned fighting in the back streets, where instead of joining the Damned Dozen, he found his way to District 16, and after gaining prosthetics, he eventually joined the Multicrack office as a fixer, one that would only accept those with prosthetics, typically with the two organic parts, the arms, replaced with forearms at a minimum, as if he was trying to create a countermeasure against Goro from Mortal Kombat. The Multicrack office appeared to originate from District 16 and based on hints from Sinclair's story, such as his family in District 11 owning a prosthetics factory that had a contract signed with e.g.o. This district appears to be quite big on prosthetics, as in cybernetic replacement. This district is likely an enemy of Encore, considering that their Psycho division is big on cleansing areas of heretics, or those with prosthetic parts. Apparently those that can afford prosthetics can choose specific parts to replace, such as the digestive tract to remove the need to eat. It just needs periodic replacement of some kind of nutrition pack, most likely. Something to slot into them to sustain the remaining organic parts. Although he has most of his body parts replaced with prosthetics. His digestive tract is not one of them. As for Ham Ham Pang Pang, it appears that fish and chips is on the menu at times. That has origins in Britain during the Industrial Revolution, 19th century, which is battered fish and thinly sliced potato, which was due to a mix of Jewish immigrants that moved to Britain for the battered fish parts and for the French for the chips. Yes, I know, even if it's supposedly a British stereotype. I can see why Heathcliff gets that. I suspect that this was a world where Catherine didn't exist, rather than one where her memory of her existence was erased, as he didn't seem that concerned about his past at Wuthering Heights, although considering that combat was now too easy for him, he felt a wave of tedium. As Arthur Schopenhauer would say, life without pain has no meaning. And seeing as pain isn't felt with his cybernetics, he feels that his life is meaningless as his life isn't challenging at all, even if it's comfortable, and he won't be running out of money anytime soon.
나는 그저 서 있을 뿐이었어.
Okay, just one more left in the general analysis and this will be done. Until next time. Hail the rabbit!